Had some issues getting this stream set up today. Let's see if I can get my remote control to actually work here. But I have an interesting topic I want to talk with everybody about today. Robert Kennedy Jr. You might know who he is. He recently dropped out of the 2024 presidential race and endorsed President Donald J. Trump he endorsed him for president. And recently, RFK has really kind of just like been coming out there and saying a lot of stuff. Most recently, he addressed chemtrails on Facebook, or excuse me, on X. This is an X post from a couple days ago, and he wrote in response to a concerned citizen, "We are going to stop this crime." Wow. That is really quite something, because there, believe it or not, is quite a story here. RFK, at least from what I know, has known about geoengineering, otherwise known as chemtrails, for a number of years. He's known about it. He's been talking about it. He's been on Dane Wigington's program, so he knows a bit about it. And he definitely, I've heard him speak on it a handful of times, but nothing, super public and nothing like this, right? So actually, believe it or not, Robert Kennedy Jr. came to Vermont in 2023. There I am with the, like the American royalty right there. I have a broken ankle in that photo, so I was actually on crutches. I had broken it the day before. So he actually came to Vermont. And Guy Page of the Vermont Daily Chronicle, who I work for, he actually had the opportunity to interview Robert Kennedy Jr. Pretty cool. So Guy actually asked him a couple questions, and it actually just so happens, by the way, this was before I worked for Guy Page. This was before I was with the Vermont Daily Chronicle, and Guy and his wife actually bought me tickets to go to that event. They actually bought them for me. I reached out to them and said, hey, I know, because they had made a press release talking about how Bobby was doing this. And they said, so I wrote to them and said, hey, I would really love to go to this, how can I get tickets? And they actually bought the tickets for me. And this was at the Ethan Allen Institute. And he talked a lot about what Vermonters are interested in, which is environmentalism, believe it or not. And he talked a lot about that in his speech, and it was incredibly interesting. And, I got the sense after listening to him, he's a highly intelligent guy, and he really knows his stuff when it comes to environmentalism. So if you're somebody who truly is an environmentalist, then you know about weather and climate modification. So he does. So actually, I happened to ask Guy Page if I could go. This was actually before the flood in 2023, the July flood, so it was before I had written any articles about geoengineering. But Guy actually asked Robert Kennedy Jr. about geoengineering. And it was just so funny, right? Because here I am, I got to go to this event because of Guy Page, and I knew that I had to go to it because I was just so excited that a Kennedy was going to be in Vermont, so I really wanted to be there. So here's what Guy asked, and he asked, so you said in the program with Dane Wigington that geoengineering is as great as a threat as climate change. Can you talk more about that? And RFK says, we're seeing these geoengineering schemes that are crazy. To fill the air with aluminum particulates, I think that's one of Bill Gates' projects. To fill the atmosphere, to darken the sunlight on Earth. We have no idea what that will do to our atmosphere, and potentially that it could be more dangerous. I don't like carbon capture. I think we should improve the resilience of our ecosystems by protecting, first of all, regenerative farming, which this nation is leading the world in, and by protecting habitats which give the climate resilience. So that comment right there, a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, is a heck of a lot different than his comment that he made on X the other day. A heck of a lot different. And let me tell you why. There's a few reasons why. One of the biggest reasons is what he's saying here in this response to Guy is what we call at our Geoengineering Age, the organization that I work for, what we call the blackboard geoengineering. The geoengineering that you hear about in school, if you will. The geoengineering that they'll talk about in the mainstream media. The geoengineering that Bill McKibben touts as a good idea, which it's definitely not a good idea, but they say that it is because we might need to do it to stop climate change. That's what they're saying. And that's the geoengineering that is being referred to by RFK here. It's the geoengineering that isn't already going on. It's the geoengineering that is a theory. It's an idea. It's something we might have to do. But this comment, when he's talking about geoengineering on X here, is a heck of a lot different for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the name of the person says, Concerned Citizen, and what they write is, I call them tanker terminators. We are paid more than any other pilot. Chemtrail pilot whistleblower. So the phrase chemtrail, I'm even told not to use the phrase chemtrail. I'm instructed. I am commanded to not use the word chemtrail. But here we have Robert Kennedy Jr. himself replying to a post that says, we are going to stop this crime, in reference to chemtrails. Pretty incredible. And the reason why it's so incredible is because he's acknowledging that this is a crime that is currently going on and has been going on for decades. And I know a lot of you, I'm just going to be very clear and honest with you. A lot of you have made a lot of fun of me over the years for talking about this subject. A lot of people have called me crazy. A lot of people have said that, for example, that I'm a crackpot for talking about this, or a crank. But here you have a massive public figure, one who is now joining the Trump campaign and potentially the Trump administration after making an incredible run for office where he was able to get on all the ballots in all 50 states, which is an incredible feat, by the way, 1 million signatures. And so obviously the guy has widespread support. He just can't get it within the Democratic Party because, they operate like they don't operate like a democracy, let's put it that way. It's not majority rules in their book. So anyways, he couldn't get through there, but now he's joining the Trump administration, and here he is talking about chemtrails. I mean, I was always so critical of Donald Trump because of what happened with COVID. I think that was a really big problem for me, and how he handled Operation Warp Speed and how he went about it. And I always thought, okay, so maybe he just doesn't know really much about the dangers of vaccines. Along with geoengineering, he never ever spoke about geoengineering, and I'm sure he barely even knew what it was. I mean, I don't know. That's what I think. I think it's kind of just like everybody else. Who really knows that that's going on, unless it's something that you're working on, or it's something that you're studying, such as myself, or RFK. And so just to build on his comment a little bit more, he says in the end, I think we should improve the resilience of our ecosystems by first protecting, first of all, regenerative farming. From my understanding, is regenerative farming, the most important piece to regenerative farming is ensuring the soil's health. And what we talk about at OGA all the time, our geoengineeringage.org, you should check it out. We were always saying how the soil is ultimately destroyed by weather and climate modification. I mean, who knew that spraying, metals and particulates and other chemicals into the atmosphere would actually be bad for everything on the ground? I mean, whoever would have thought, right? I mean, that's so shocking. But obviously, RFK, this is the thing. When I first read this story after he came and spoke to us in Vermont, when I first read this story, I thought, okay, so for whatever reason, he's playing politics there, and he is acknowledging, yes, that geoengineering is a thing. He is saying that, yes, what is it all about, but he's talking about it as if it's something that isn't currently being done. And it's a very political talk as far as I'm concerned. And when you look at this video, when you look at this statement, at that time, yeah, he was running for office. He was trying to win the Democratic nomination. And really, his statement is so, it's not bland, but it's non-controversial because he basically just said something about a topic that most people really don't know anything about. However, when he talks about it here, he acknowledges it as something currently going on and as a crime. And the word chemtrail, by the way, right there. I mean, if you look up the phrase chemtrail, just Google chemtrail, you're going to find immediately it's all mainstream media sources calling it conspiracy theory, debunk conspiracy theory, debunk conspiracy theory. Honestly, I just think he is so brave for pointing this topic out and actually being willing and able to talk about it because, man, there really is something about these Kennedys, man. They just put a target on them. And this is one where, I know the people that are doing this, they are so serious about ensuring that it continues. Because it's how their whole scheme for climate change is built around, and furthermore, it definitely adds to the chronic illness and disease in this country. Geoengineering, big piece of it. You can read more about that at our geoengineeringage.org. But really, it's just such an unprecedented moment in American history. And actually, I do have Rob Williams, who's going to join me on the phone here. Let's see if I can get him. I've been trying to call him. He's been trying to call me. Rob, are you there?
Right here, Paul.
I'm sorry I missed your call. I'm live here on Creemee Cast.
You're crushing it. I'm just listening.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, what do you think, Guy? What are your excuse me, Guy? Rob, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Are we on the air?
Yeah, we are.
Well, hi, everybody. And you know how I feel about that.
I'm sorry, Rob. It just cut out everything you just said except for the part where you said, I know how you know how I feel about that.
Oh, about the use of the word chemtrails.
I do know how you feel about the use of the word chemtrails.
I think, though, when you're RFK, you could certainly cut through the clutter and get people's attention by using that word.
I thought you would have a good take on that. Yeah. Well, lucky him.
Yeah, I guess when you're a Kennedy, and as you just said, you have a target on your back anyway.
Well, what does that mean for let's say the Trump administration? What does that look like? You know, say Trump does get elected, how are they going to stop this crime? How do you even go about that?
Well, it's a tough one because we're not even quite sure who the perpetrators are. So it's very challenging to stop a crime when you don't know who the perpetrators of the crime are. But certainly, if you're operating from the presidential seat, you have a lot more power and influence than maybe most anyone else in an elected position. I think you and I probably both agree that geoengineering activities are being perpetrated by members of the U.S. military, perhaps the so-called deep state unelected bureaucracy. And I think it's a huge moment calling out the crime. So kudos. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You know, I mentioned, and I don't know if you know this or not, Rob, but I just mentioned on the show too that we did interview Robert Kennedy Jr. back in 2023, and Guy Page actually asked him about geoengineering. And I want you to know, this is like one of those things where it's like geoengineering was not on Guy's radar. I didn't even, at that point, like I had somewhat of a relationship with Guy, but I didn't really know him.
Yeah.
And he just asked that question. I don't know, like I don't know why he did. He just felt compelled to, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And you know what we've been doing, you and I, at our geoengineeringage.org for many years now, is simply research, education, raising awareness, publicizing this ongoing decades-long environmental modification activity. And it's nice to see that people are beginning to look up and wake up.
No, I completely agree. I think that this is a growing sentiment. You know, I've been having conversations with people since this, and really the last 3 months, where people are now like actually willing to even talk about it. I mean, there was a period of time, I mean, everything prior to now, where you would be literally laughed out of a conversation for bringing it up, or even the concept that weather and climate modification is possible. It just is. It's such a huge moment for us to have this. And you know, I know your feelings about. I guess I don't know your feelings. What are your feelings on Trump and RFK teaming up, Rob? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a political decentralist, as you know.
Yes, I do.
I don't actually think much about it either way. Something, though, that RFK said in his conversation with Tucker Carlson yesterday stuck for me. He said this: if you want to divide the American people, then talk about carbon. If you want to unite the American people, talk about toxin removal and habitat restoration. And I thought that was a really interesting insight. And you and I both know that geoengineering is, of course, a form of toxin and pollution that's been ongoing for many decades. And to really get our arms around the climate change so-called problem, I think we have to take geoengineering seriously. And to the extent that this will help, both of these gentlemen raising the flag on this, I say more power to them.
No, I completely agree, and we definitely should talk more about what you think of that in the future, Rob. I know maybe off air we can have some conversations about it, but it is definitely for geoengineering and environmental people such as ourselves. This is a huge deal, and hopefully going forward that there will be some work done to stop this. And I mentioned this today on Twitter. I just wrote this on X, and I'll say it to you too, Rob. Any way that we can help make that possible, we want to be part of the conversation. That's why it's called Our Geoengineering Age, because it truly is our geoengineering age. We aren't just, it isn't like there's this breakaway civilization where people are, manipulating and controlling the weather and becoming transhumanists, and meanwhile the rest of us just live like, like bugs or whatever. Like we are all humans. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's right. And we've all been implicated in this age of geoengineering for almost 100 years now, since the 1940s. So I agree with you. And yeah, let's have more conversation off the air. But I think I'll sign off with saying that genuine environmentalists everywhere who are paying attention are celebrating the fact that RFK stated this publicly from his bully pulpit. So good for him, and good for you, Paul, for covering this, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for calling in, Rob, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too, Paul.
I am. I'm going
to keep the flow going.
I'm going to keep the flow going, and stay tuned for a Substack post later today, Rob, and everyone out there listening. So thank you so much, Rob. We're going to hang it up now, but I am going to stay on for just a minute here. I really want to just nail this message home, because I can't express enough how gratifying, to be honest, this is, how much of a relief it is to hear this from somebody in such a high place, because I really do mean it. For years, and I'm not alone in this. I'm not trying to act like I'm some sort of victim here, but for years, we've been mocked over this subject. I've been been laughed at by friends and family and not taken seriously about this. And I think a lot of people just thought, like, okay, Paul, well, you're crazy, and I'm not. And it turns out Robert Kennedy Jr. also agrees, and maybe even potentially Donald Trump. What more is there to be said? Rob definitely nails a point home about government and decentralism as a whole. I really do I really do identify with those values too. However, being president still means something. Being commander-in-chief of the United States military still means something. Actually, it means a lot. And if that's the organization that is involved in weather and climate modification, which I believe they are one of them, the United States Air Force, the United States Navy, Space Force potentially is probably involved in climate and weather modification. I'm pretty sure they are. There is a lot of room for them to make headway. What it seems like to me, right? Everybody, and this is one thing I will say, everybody seems to think that when you become president of the United States, that like all of a sudden, you get to go to this like meeting where whoever they are, which they bring you to this meeting and they just like tell you all the secrets to the universe, essentially, right? Like everybody thinks you become president, and then like this person's going to tell you, where aliens are, where they're coming from. This is where the UFOs are. Then this person's going to tell you who killed the Kennedys. This guy knows. It's like all this stuff, and then there's this black budget organization is doing this thing, and like you're just going to find out all these truths. Well, that's not the case. It's not the case at all. When you become president, it's like an open door. But you still better have your ducks in a row once you get yourself into that position, because a lot of people aren't going to tell you anything. There's a lot of stuff that you're not going to be told. And so, for example, right, who's doing the geoengineering? Well, I highly doubt that any of these classified projects, the people that are controlling them, the people that are doing them, these covert geoengineering operations, these people are making a lot of money, by the way, and they're manipulating the entire globe to believe that we're all going to die because of climate change. I mean, we're talking about the petrodollar here, which is the entire world's economic system. Like, they're trying to uproot it. I mean, there's so many uses for geoengineering, and just the fact that this man, a Kennedy, whose father was killed for wanting to expose truths like this, whose uncle was killed as president for wanting to expose truths like this. I mean, man, I think it's incredible. I mean, there's been so many times where, when you're somebody as myself, where you're looking at the world and you're just like, there's so much craziness going on, there's so much darkness, and to have a bit of hope like this, it is really, really impressive. And I have a comment from Wizard. Wizard writes, the president is powerful, certainly, but still a puppet in comparison to the real world rulers. And I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. I think the president has a role, and they really are kind of like the face of the free world. But at the end of the day, they don't really make all the decisions. But this is what I'll say. This is why this is so unprecedented. Because I have been arguing, and I said this to family recently, and I do believe this to a certain extent, that there are people out there that really have control of things, and they control the money, which is the big one. And you have, on one end, the other end, and it's like two walls, essentially. These are the things you're allowed to talk about and go after, and even Trump falls into this to a certain degree, right? Like, they let him do and say what he does, but there's like certain parameters, like there's rules that the game is played within, and that's how it is, right? And like geoengineering to me is like one of those spots where you can't go there. You can't go there if you're here. You can't do that. Because of the real people that have control. You're not going to get the money that you need, for example, to run for president. You're not going to have the support of the corporations, right? If you go outside this wall. But and I always said, like, they're kind of all two birds of the same feather. What's the phrase? Two wings of the same bird. Anyway, or two sides of the same coin. It's like that is the case. Like, I do believe that to a certain extent. However, to go into geoengineering, that breaks that. I'm sorry, I just think it does. It breaks this. It breaks the walls. And it's an exploration of a topic that, even if you're somebody like myself, like, I get so discouraged studying this topic that I don't even want to think about it sometimes because it's so dark. But we have to. And RFK is doing it. And I just think it's really amazing. And Wizard writes again, crazy that they took away RFK's Secret Service protection, even though his name is still on the ballot. He is exposing some very powerful people. Yes, he is. And, we got to pray for his protection, hope for his protection and safety, and hope that nothing happens to him or the president, for that matter, or Donald Trump, for that matter, because we need that man to get into office. If we're gonna, and well, I'm not gonna say that we can't do this without them, but this is a huge piece of the puzzle, and to see it happening, I really just want to nail this home. I mean, I've even asked the governor about geoengineering here in Vermont. I asked Phil Scott about geoengineering at a press conference, and this was now the third flood in 1 year, so I felt like it was okay to finally ask that question. But I've been thinking it for much longer than that. And so I asked them it, and nobody really laughed at me there, because I think at this point a lot of Vermonters are questioning things. There are a lot of people across the political spectrum are questioning things. I mean, so anyway, I've had instances. I'll give you a perfect example, actually. Jim Danzino of the Vermont, he's the executive director of the Vermont Democratic Party. He and I we're like oil and water, man. Like, we don't. I guess we are. I've never had a real conversation with him other than this one. He yelled at me once and told me to leave the State House, and I don't remember the context of how this came up, but then he goes, "Didn't you host a chemtrail rally on Saturday, Paul Bean?" Or something like that. He said it something like that. Maybe it wasn't exactly like that, but he was close. And at that point, yeah, I didn't host it, but I attended an it was a geoengineering resistance gathering. That was at the Barrie Legion over in Barrie, Vermont. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd been there. I mean, there's groups of us talking about it in Vermont. Like, there's a lot of people talking about this. And, it's great now to have a leader that is able, willing, and going to do something about it. So I just want to express absolute gratitude to him for being so brave to do that, because he really is so brave to put his neck on the line like this. This is a big one. It's a really big deal. And so I just want to come out, talk about it for a few minutes. Wow, I've been going for 25 minutes. I can't believe that. And I hope everybody's enjoyed. I feel free to reach out to me for any questions you might have on the subject matter itself, or anything you want to know. But I'm just so happy about this, guys. I had to go live for a few minutes and express my gratitude. And let's keep fighting the good fight. So everyone, actually, later on this afternoon, I am going to have a guest on. We're going to be talking about the event that I'm having here in Northfield. We're having a car show on Friday. Motor show. So you don't have to bring a car necessarily. You could pull up with your boat on a trailer. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care. Just want to see it. You can bring your lawnmower if it's a nice one, if it's a cool one. Don't bring, a real junky one, but you can if you want. Jokes aside, we are having a car show, motor show here on Friday. Good Measure Pub and Brewery is going to be here serving beer. We're going to have a band, Evan David Warner. He's also a Northfield native, so we're going to have some fun. And heading into the weekend here, man, this is just such great news. And so we'll see you guys here on Thursday. I got Cars and Creamees tonight. Come on by, get yourself a Creemee. Anyway, I'm just rambling here, folks, so I'm going to shut it down. So thank you so much for tuning in, and